Well, here I am once again at the National Monument to the Forefathers. Remember, it's a monument of the past put here by a past generation of Americans to send a message to the future generations, a generation that would be drifting from the origin, the foundation of our nation. Remember, on top of this monument is Lady Faith. What this past generation was teaching through the Pilgrim's worldview was that a free people was a people with faith in the God of heaven. And Lady Faith is surrounded, remember, by four allegorical figures. These are four pillars of a free society, as we see the recipe, the matrix of liberty. Morality, and then you have law, then you have education, and then you have liberty, the four table legs of a civilization. Morality is something that happens inwardly, as we saw last week. But that should then lead to a civil law that's reflective of God's moral law. And so you have the institution of law or civil government. And what this past generation was teaching is that a truly Christian civilization would have a fair and just system of law that reflects the moral law of God in some capacity, exactly as the Apostle Paul was teaching in Romans 13, 1 through 5. God delegates his authority to civil authority or human authority for the good order of society, because where there is no authority, the society will break down into anarchy. And so you have to have a criminal justice system, you have to have a civil justice system to order society. And so that is now the pillar that is behind me. One of the pillars of civilization is law. And I want you to notice Mr. Law, who looks very, very wise. He's aged. He's very, very fair. And I want you to notice what he has. He has the 10 Commandments, because civil law in some way should be reflective of God's moral law. No, America has never been a theocracy, but as a people of faith and biblical at its inception, our civil laws reflect, in fact, God's moral laws. And unlike other places in history and other nations from which our framers had come, this law would be fair. It would be just. It would not be on the whims of a totalitarian regime or a European monarchy, as was very familiar to the constitutional framers of our civilization. That's why this law is surrounded by two other figures. You have justice on one side and mercy on the other. I want you to notice, first of all, justice. Lady Justice is holding the scales of justice. And what she's saying is that in our judicial system of law, it would have to be very just. It could not be as it was in times past, where somebody could be held in prison or taken to jail and not be charged with any crime, maybe for months or even years on end. And that's why we have the Bill of Rights, for example, that guarantees all Americans today a speedy and fair trial with a jury of their peers. And I want you to notice those scales are very, very clear. What she's saying is the punishment must fit the crime. And again, that's why, again, you have the Bill of Rights that outlaws any punishment that is cruel or unusual. In totalitarian regimes, our framers and founders of the Constitution remembered how often people would be tortured, burned at the stake, or literally skinned alive. Horrible, horrible punishments for their crimes. And so Lady Justice is saying not only will our criminal justice system be fair, and the scales of justice will tell the truth, but the punishment must fit the crime. Now, I want you to notice something else. She's holding a sword, and that would reference Romans 13, as the Apostle Paul referred to the executioner's sword. It will be a civil justice system where God has delegated his authority, criminally speaking, to the worst offenders, criminal offenders. You see, the role of government is protecting citizens, not simply from enemies from without, but by perpetrators from within that would take the life of the innocent. But on the other side of justice, you have mercy. Unlike other criminal justice systems of the past, or even those around the world today in the present, our justice system in the eyes of God should be full of mercy, because while God is a standard bearer, And in fact, he is the lawgiver. He's also a God of great mercy and second chances. Notice mercy's hands are open because she's saying, listen, our criminal justice system should give second chances to those who need it and want it. Her hands are open to those who need or want a new beginning. Why? Because that's a picture of the gospel. That's a picture of our God. Yes, he is a standard bearer. And yes, he is the lawgiver. And there are consequences for breaking the law of God, and there are consequences for breaking the law of man. But the good news of the gospel is God gives second chances. He gives new beginnings. And America should be a land of second chances, a place of new beginnings. And it should be reflected in man's civil laws because it's reflected in the laws of God, the God of heaven.